He's carved into Mount Rushmore, celebrated as the father of a free nation. But here's what they don't teach you in school. George Washington owned over 300 enslaved people, and the truth of what happened next will make you question everything you thought you knew about America's greatest hero. Mr. Stark here, and today we're uncovering the moral contradiction that shaped a nation. Because Washington's story isn't about good versus evil, it's about a man caught between two worlds and the impossible choice that cost thousands their freedom. Let's start with the money. When George Washington inherited his first plantation, Mount Vernon wasn't just a beautiful estate, it was a machine powered by human suffering. By the time he became president, Washington controlled over 8,000 acres of prime Virginia land. His wealth was staggering for the time. But here's the thing nobody talks about. Almost every single dollar of that wealth came directly from enslaved labor. Washington didn't just own a few house servants, he ran massive agricultural operations, tobacco fields stretching for miles, wheat mills, fisheries, all of it completely dependent on people he bought and sold like cattle. Think about that for a second. The man who wrote, "All men are created equal," while sitting in that beautiful plantation, understood exactly what slavery was. He lived it every single day. He saw the faces, he heard the suffering, and yet he continued. Why? Because slavery made him rich beyond imagination, and that's where our story gets complicated.
But here's where it gets interesting. Washington wasn't a cartoon villain. He wasn't someone who didn't think about what he was doing. Historical records show something fascinating. Washington had doubts. His private letters reveal a man wrestling with the contradiction. He wrote about the moral evil of slavery. He spoke privately about wanting to free his enslaved workers, but he never did, not while he was alive anyway. Why the hesitation? Because slavery wasn't just his personal moral problem, it was woven into every financial decision he'd ever made. Freeing his enslaved people would have meant dismantling his entire empire, his wealth, his power, his legacy. He was trapped, and he knew it. So, instead, he did something remarkable, something that would haunt history forever. He waited, and when the moment finally came, when death was knocking on his door, he made his choice.
Let's go back in time to 1791. Washington is president, the nation is barely held together, and behind closed doors at the White House, he's having conversations that could have torn the nation apart if made public. His wife, Martha, didn't want to free enslaved people. His colleagues in Congress would have opposed it fiercely. Slavery was the economic engine of the South. Freeing his workers would have been seen as a radical betrayal. But Washington kept thinking about it. He spoke with trusted advisors. He documented his thoughts. The internal struggle was real. There's a letter where he essentially admits, "I cannot do this publicly, but I cannot leave this as is." He was caught between his conscience and his world, between who he wanted to be and who the system had made him. And that tension, that impossible pressure, shaped everything that came next.
Now, let's talk about something rarely discussed: the enslaved people Washington knew personally. One woman changed everything for him. Her name was Sally Hemings. No, wait, let me correct that. Sally Hemings was Thomas Jefferson's enslaved woman. But Washington had his own enslaved companions and workers he knew by name, people he spoke to daily. Among them was a man named Billy. Billy worked as Washington's personal aide. They spent hours together. Washington would talk to Billy about the war, about the nation, about his dreams. And Billy was enslaved. The historical record suggests Washington saw Billy's humanity in a way that made the cognitive dissonance unbearable. How do you look someone in the eye every day, someone you've had thousands of conversations with, and pretend they're property? This is the quiet tragedy nobody discusses, the personal relationships that made slavery undeniable for Washington in a way that statistics and morality never could. As Washington aged, the internal war intensified. He was in his 60s, his health was declining, and something shifted in him. Maybe it was mortality, maybe it was legacy, or maybe, just maybe, his conscience had finally won. Washington began drafting his will, and in that will, he made a decision that shocked everyone around him. He would free his enslaved workers. Not immediately, not during his lifetime, but after his death. Why the delay? Because even in his final act of conscience, he was still trapped by the system. Freeing enslaved people during his presidency would have caused political chaos. It would have made him a pariah in the South. It could have fractured the fragile nation he'd fought so hard to build. So he compromised. He chose the path of least resistance, the safe choice. But was it the right choice? That's the question that haunts history. December 1799. Washington is dying. He knows his time is ending. And in his will, he writes something extraordinary. He orders that all the enslaved people he personally owned should be freed. Not sold, not transferred, freed. It was a radical act, the only founding father to free his enslaved people, even in his will. But here's the catch that makes this story so painfully complex. Washington didn't own all the enslaved people at Mount Vernon. Some were property of his wife's previous marriage. Those people were not freed. They remained enslaved. So his great act of conscience was incomplete, partial. It freed maybe 300 people, but it left behind a family, children, and relationships torn apart by the boundaries of property law. When the news spread, reactions were mixed. Abolitionists saw him as a hero who finally did the right thing. Southerners saw him as a traitor. And the enslaved people themselves? Many had mixed feelings. Freedom without the ability to reunite with family members still enslaved at Mount Vernon. It was freedom with asterisks, liberty with footnotes. Washington died on December 14, 1999. News of his will spread quickly, and it sparked something unexpected, a national conversation about slavery. But here's what happened next that most people don't know. The freed enslaved people faced a crisis. Freedom in 1800 didn't mean opportunity. There were no social services, no safety net, no pathway to prosperity. These people were freed with nothing, no money, no education, no land, no family connections outside of slavery. Some tried to stay at Mount Vernon and work for wages, a radical concept at the time. Others fled north, hoping to find work and build lives. Many suffered. Some never recovered from the trauma of enslavement, even in freedom. The historical record shows that Washington's grand gesture of conscience didn't actually save anyone in the practical sense. It was morally significant, but practically, it changed very little. And yet, it was still significant because it challenged the narrative that slavery was permanent, unchangeable, that enslaved people didn't deserve freedom. Washington, the nation's greatest hero, had declared them worthy of liberation, even if only after death. That's complicated. That's messy. That's human.
So where does this leave us? How do we understand Washington? Historians still debate it. Some argue that Washington was ahead of his time, a slaveholder who at least had the conscience to free his enslaved people. Others argue he was a coward who waited until death to do the bare minimum. Both are true. Washington lived his entire life in a system that demanded moral compromise. He built his wealth and power through slavery. He understood slavery's evil, but he chose profit and legacy over immediate action. Then, at the very end, he made a choice that acknowledged the humanity of the people he'd enslaved. But by then, it was too late for hundreds of people who lived and died in captivity. This isn't a story with a clean moral. It's a story about contradiction, about a man, however great, trapped in a system so corrupt that even his conscience couldn't save him from complicity. And that's the lesson America has never fully reckoned with. The Founding Fathers built a nation on ideals they didn't live up to. They knew better, and they did it anyway. Washington's will freed some people, but it couldn't free the nation from the lie at its foundation, that all men are created equal, except for the ones we enslave. There's a reason this story isn't taught in schools the way it should be. Because Washington's contradiction is America's contradiction. We celebrate the founding on freedom and equality. We teach children that America is built on these ideals. But the foundation was actually built on slavery, on the labor and suffering of hundreds of thousands of people. Washington didn't invent this system. He inherited it, but he perpetuated it. He profited from it, and he had the power and the resources to do more to end it. Instead, he made a compromise, a partial gesture of conscience that came too late to save most of the people he'd enslaved. And we've spent centuries trying to make his life fit a narrative of heroism. The truth is, Washington was a product of his time, a product of a corrupt system, a product of choices made by people who knew better but did the wrong thing anyway. Sound familiar? Because we do the same thing. We benefit from systems we know are unjust. We make compromises. We wait. And then we tell ourselves stories about how we tried. Washington's story isn't about him, it's about us. So here's what I want you to understand. Understanding Washington's contradiction doesn't diminish his military achievements or his political contributions. Those are real and significant. But it does mean we have to stop worshiping him as a moral icon. We have to acknowledge that greatness and moral failure can coexist in the same person, that intelligence doesn't equal conscience, that power doesn't equal virtue. Washington freed his enslaved people in his will. It was significant, but it was also insufficient. It was conscience limited by cowardice, morality constrained by self-interest. And the enslaved people of America, the ones who lived under systems perpetuated by Washington's generation, paid the price for that moral compromise. So today, that legacy still echoes. Systemic inequality, racial wealth gaps, generational trauma. These aren't accidents. They're the direct result of decisions made by men like Washington who knew slavery was wrong, but chose profit anyway. So when we look at Washington's will, we're not just looking at a historical document. We're looking at the moment when America's founding contradiction was finally acknowledged, when the father of the nation admitted at the very end that slavery was incompatible with the nation he'd built. He just waited 67 years to say it, and by then, it was too late. Mr. Stark here, and I need to be honest with you. This story isn't comfortable. It's not meant to be. Because the most important histories aren't the ones that make us feel good about ourselves. They're the ones that force us to ask harder questions. Washington's will teaches us that moral compromise is a choice, and choices have consequences that echo through centuries. Every single one of us will face moments where we have to choose between comfort and conscience, between what's easy and what's right. Washington chose comfort for most of his life. Only at the end did he finally choose differently. The question is, how many times will we wait, and what will we have lost by then?
If this story resonated with you, if you felt the weight of Washington's contradiction, then I want to hear from you. Comment below. What do you think? Did Washington's will redeem him, or was it too little, too late? And if you want more stories like this, hidden truths about history, about power, about the people who shape nations, then subscribe, because history isn't just what we remember, it's what we choose to finally tell. Thank you for watching. Stay curious.